I thought I had it all. A loving husband, a beautiful home, a perfect life. But one phone call shattered everything I thought I knew. "Wrong number," he said. But something in his voice made my heart sink. Little did I know, that call was just the beginning. Suspicious late nights at the office, secret text messages, unexplained charges on our credit card. My world was crumbling, and I was desperate for answers. "I still care about you, Sarah," he told me. But how could he, when every word from his mouth tasted like a lie? I never thought I'd be the type to spy on my own husband. Yet there I was, hiding in my car, watching him kiss another woman. The betrayal cut deep, but it ignited something in me, a fire I didn't know I had. This is my story, a story of heartbreak and betrayal, yes, but also a story of strength, of rediscovery, of a woman who refused to be broken. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But when your entire life is built on lies, can you ever truly trust again? Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. One moment, you're living what you think is your happily ever after, and the next, everything comes crashing down around you. That's how my story begins, with a seemingly perfect life that was about to be turned upside down. I'm Sarah, and for 10 years, I thought I had it all. A loving husband, Mike, a cozy home in a nice neighborhood, and a fulfilling career as an accountant. We were that couple everyone envied, you know, the ones who still held hands and laughed at each other's jokes after a decade together. Our routine was comfortable, almost predictable. Weekday mornings, we'd share a quick breakfast before rushing off to our respective jobs. Evenings were for catching up over dinner, sharing the highs and lows of our day. Weekends, those were our time to unwind. Maybe have friends over for a barbecue or binge watch the latest TV series everyone was talking about. I remember this one Saturday morning, about 6 months ago. Mike and I were lounging in our backyard, enjoying the warm sunshine and planning our upcoming vacation. "Hey, babe," Mike said, looking up from his phone. "What do you think about trying that new Italian place downtown for our anniversary next month?" I smiled, touched that he'd remembered. "Sounds perfect. Maybe we could invite Jack and Emma too. Make it a double celebration since it's their anniversary the same week." Mike's face lit up. "Great idea. I'll text Jack now." As I watched him tap away on his phone, I felt a rush of warmth. This was why I loved him, always thoughtful, always including our friends in our plans. I reached out and squeezed his hand, feeling grateful for our life together. Later that day, we decided to tackle some long overdue spring cleaning. As we sorted through old boxes in the attic, I came across a dusty photo album from our wedding. "Oh my gosh, Mike, look at this," I called out, laughing as I flipped through the pages. "Remember how nervous you were during your vows?" He came over, peering over my shoulder. How could I forget? I was terrified I'd mess them up in front of everyone. We spent the next hour reliving memories, laughing at old hairstyles and cringing at some of the fashion choices our guests had made. It was moments like these that made me feel so secure in our relationship. As the day wound down, we ordered takeout and curled up on the couch to watch a movie. Mike's arm was around me, and I leaned into him, feeling content. "You know," I said during a quiet moment, "I'm really looking forward to our trip next month. It'll be nice to have some time just for us." Mike kissed the top of my head. "Me too, sweetheart. Work's been crazy lately, and I could use a break." I nodded, understanding all too well. My own job had been hectic recently, with a big audit coming up. "Speaking of work, how's that new project going? The one with the difficult client?" Mike stiffened slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Oh, you know, same old, same old. They're demanding, but we're making progress." I looked up at him, noticing a flicker of something in his eyes. Stress, maybe. "Well, if you need to vent, I'm always here to listen." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I know, babe. Thanks." We fell back into silence, focusing on the movie. But a tiny seed of unease had been planted in my mind. It was nothing, really. just a slight change in his demeanor when I mentioned work. But in hindsight, I realize now that this was the moment when the first hairline crack appeared in the foundation of our marriage. As we got ready for bed that night, I pushed the niggling worry aside. After all, we were happy, weren't we? We had a good life, plans for the future, and each other. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, how naive I was. If only I'd known then what was coming. Maybe I could have prepared myself better. But life doesn't work that way, does it? It throws curveballs when you least expect them, and all you can do is try to hit them out of the park. Little did I know, my perfect life was about to unravel thread by thread. But that's a story for another day. For now, I drifted off to sleep, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. I woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of Mike's voice drifting up from downstairs. Stretching, I glanced at the clock, 7:30 a.m. on a Sunday. Unusual for Mike to be up so early on a weekend. Curious, I padded down to the kitchen, following the hushed tones of his conversation. As I approached, I caught the tail end of what he was saying. No, it's fine. I'll handle it. Don't worry. He turned as I entered, quickly ending the call. Morning, sleepyhead, he said, a bit too brightly. Coffee? Who was that? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Oh, just work stuff. You know how it is. He shrugged, handing me a steaming mug. I nodded, but something felt off. Since when did work call on a Sunday morning? We settled into our usual weekend routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It was like a pebble in my shoe, small but impossible to ignore. Later that week, I was cooking dinner when Mike's phone buzzed on the counter. A text notification flashed across the screen. Wrong number? Sorry. I thought nothing of it until it happened again the next day, and the day after that. Always when Mike was in the shower or had stepped out of the room. Honey, I called out one evening, your phone keeps getting these weird wrong number messages. Mike appeared in the doorway, a towel around his waist and water still dripping from his hair. Oh yeah, he said, reaching for the phone. Probably just some telemarketing thing. I'll block the number. But the calls didn't stop. They just came from different numbers. I tried to brush it off, but doubt had taken root. I found myself watching Mike more closely, noticing little things I'd overlooked before. How he'd step outside to take calls. The way he angled his phone away when texting. One night, as we lay in bed, I decided to confront him. Mike, I started, my heart racing. Is everything okay? You seem distracted lately. He turned to me, his face unreadable in the dim light. Everything's fine, Sarah. Work's just been stressful, that's all. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But the seed of doubt had sprouted, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I woke to find Mike's side of the bed empty. Frowning, I checked the time, 6 a.m. Where could he be? I found him in the living room, pacing as he talked on the phone in hushed tones. He didn't notice me at first, and I caught a snippet of his conversation. I know, it's complicated. Just give me some time to figure things out, okay? My stomach dropped. Figure what out? Who was he talking to? He saw me then, ending the call abruptly. Hey, you're up early, he said, trying to sound casual. Who was that? I asked, not bothering to hide my suspicion this time. Mike ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd always found endearing. Now it just made my heart ache. Just a client in a different time zone. Sorry if I woke you. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We went about our morning routine in silence, the tension palpable. As the days passed, the distance between us grew. Mike worked later, came home distracted. Our easy conversations turned stilted, full of awkward pauses and things left unsaid. I tried to talk to him about it, but he always had an excuse. It's just work stress, he'd say, or I'm just tired. Don't worry about it. But I did worry. I worried constantly. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I found a receipt in Mike's pocket. Dinner for two at an upscale restaurant downtown. On a night he'd told me he was working late. My hand shook as I stared at the slip of paper. It could be innocent, I told myself. A business dinner, perhaps. But deep down, I knew. This was the smoking gun I'd been dreading. I confronted him that night, my voice trembling as I held up the receipt. "What's this, Mike? Who were you with?" He paled, stuttering as he tried to explain. "It's not what you think, Sarah. It was a client dinner. I should have told you. I'm sorry." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But the lies had piled up too high, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please, just tell me the truth." Mike's shoulders slumped, defeat written across his face, but still, he couldn't bring himself to admit it. "There's nothing to tell, Sarah. You're imagining things." I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, tears soaking my pillow. The man lying next to me, the one I'd loved for over a decade, suddenly felt like a stranger. As I drifted off into a fitful sleep, I couldn't help but wonder, what happened to us? When did we start keeping secrets? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? Little did I know, my world was about to be turned upside down. The journey ahead would test me in ways I never imagined, pushing me to my limits and forcing me to confront truths I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But that's the thing about life-changing moments. They rarely announce themselves. They creep up on you, disguised as ordinary days, until suddenly, everything changes. And my moment? It was just around the corner. The next few weeks were a blur of suspicion and heartache. Every time Mike's phone buzzed, my stomach churned. Every late night at the office felt like a betrayal. I was living on edge, constantly searching for clues, desperate for the truth but terrified of what I might find. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find Mike already dressed, keys in hand. "Hey, I've got to run to the office for a bit," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Shouldn't be more than a few hours." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "On a Saturday? That's new." He shrugged, that now familiar look of discomfort flashing across his face. "Big project? You know how it is." As the front door clicked shut behind him, I felt something inside me snap. Enough was enough. I couldn't live like this anymore. I spent the morning pacing, my mind racing. When Mike returned home that afternoon, I was waiting for him in the kitchen, a cup of cold coffee clutched in my trembling hands. "We need to talk," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Mike sighed, dropping his keys on the counter. "About what, Sarah?" "About us. About whatever's going on with you. These late nights. The secretive phone calls." "Mike, I'm not stupid. I know something's wrong." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "Nothing's wrong. You're overreacting." "Am I?" I countered, my voice rising. "Then explain the receipt I found, the one for dinner for two on a night you said you were working late." Mike's face paled, but he quickly recovered. "It was a business dinner. I told you that. And the constant wrong number calls, the way you angle your phone away when you're texting," my voice cracked. "Mike, please, just tell me the truth." For a moment, I thought he might confess, but then his expression hardened. "There's nothing to tell. Sarah, you're letting your imagination run wild." I felt like I'd been slapped. "My imagination? Is that what you're going with?" He threw up his hands. "What do you want me to say? That I'm having an affair? Is that what you want to hear?" The word hung in the air between us, affair. The thing I'd been too afraid to name, now out in the open. "Are you?" I whispered, not sure I wanted to hear the answer. Mike's silence spoke volumes. I don't remember much of what happened next. There was yelling, crying, accusations thrown back and forth. By the time it was over, we were both exhausted, emotionally drained. "I think," I said, my voice hoarse, "that you should sleep in the guest room tonight." He nodded, not meeting my eyes as he gathered some things and left our bedroom. Our bedroom. The thought made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. That night, as I lay alone in our bed, I realized something had fundamentally changed. The trust, the foundation of our relationship had crumbled, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be rebuilt. The next few days were a dance of avoidance. We moved around each other like ghosts, speaking only when necessary. Mike threw himself into work, leaving early and coming home late. I buried myself in household chores, anything to keep my mind occupied. But the suspicion wouldn't leave me. If anything, it grew stronger. I found myself checking his phone when he left it unattended, scanning through his emails, searching for any concrete evidence of what I already knew in my heart to be true. It was during one of these searches that I found it. A text message, hastily deleted but not quite gone from the phone's memory. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place as last time." My world tilted on its axis. There it was, in black and white. Proof. I confronted Mike that evening, my voice surprisingly calm as I recited the message word for word. I expected more denials, more excuses. What I didn't expect was his reaction. He crumpled, right there in our living room. "I'm sorry," he whispered, over and over. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." I stood there, watching the man I loved fall apart, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a vast, echoing emptiness. "Who is she?" I asked, not sure I wanted to know the answer. "My assistant," Mike said, his voice barely audible. It just happened." I laughed then, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised us both. "It just happened? Like you tripped and fell into an affair?" Mike flinched at my words. "I never meant to hurt you, Sarah. I love you." "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't you dare say you love me. Not now." We talked for hours that night. Or rather, Mike talked, pouring out confessions and apologies in equal measure. I listened, feeling oddly detached, as if I was watching a movie of someone else's life falling apart. By the time dawn broke, we'd reached a decision. Mike would move out, stay with a friend until we figured out what to do next. As I watched him pack a bag, I realized this might be the last time I saw him in our home. "I'll call you," he said as he stood at the door, looking lost and small. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and then he was gone, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of our once happy home. As I sank onto the couch, exhaustion finally overtaking me, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The beginning of a journey I never wanted to take, but one I knew I had to see through. Because somewhere beneath the pain and betrayal, a small voice whispered, "You're stronger than this. You'll get through it." And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe it might be true. The days after Mike moved out were a blur of pain and confusion. I wandered through our house, my house now, feeling like a ghost in my own life. Every room held memories, echoes of laughter and love that now felt tainted. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office just to avoid coming home to an empty house. My colleagues noticed the change in me, the dark circles under my eyes, the forced smiles. But I brushed off their concerns with vague excuses about stress and deadlines. One evening, as I sat at my desk long after everyone else had gone home, my friend and coworker, Lisa, perched on the edge of my desk. "Okay, spill it," she said, fixing me with a no-nonsense stare. "What's really going on, Sarah?" I opened my mouth to give her my usual brush-off, but something in her kind eyes broke my resolve. Before I knew it, I was spilling everything. The suspicions, the confrontation, Mike's confession. Lisa listened without interrupting, her face a mix of shock and sympathy. When I finished, she reached out and squeezed my hand. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" I shrugged, feeling lost. "I don't know. I need to know for sure, you know? I need to understand how this happened, when it started. I can't move on until I have answers." Lisa nodded, a determined look crossing her face. "Then let's get you some answers." Over the next few days, Lisa became my unofficial detective partner. We pored over bank statements, looking for unexplained expenses. We combed through Mike's social media, searching for any clues he might have left behind. It was during one of these sessions that I had an idea. His work computer, I said suddenly. He always brings it home. It's probably still at the house. Lisa raised an eyebrow. And are you thinking what I'm thinking? I nodded, a mix of determination and guilt churning in my stomach. I know his password. I could check his emails, his calendar. Sarah, Lisa said gently, are you sure you want to do this? Once you open that door, you can't close it. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I need to know, Lisa. I can't move on until I do. That night, I sat in front of Mike's laptop, my finger hovering over the power button. Part of me felt guilty for invading his privacy, but a larger part needed answers. With a deep breath, I turned it on. As I scrolled through his emails, my heart pounding, I felt like I was watching a car crash in slow motion. There they were, in black and white, emails to his assistant, arranging meetings that never appeared on his work calendar. Flirtatious exchanges that made my stomach churn. And then I saw it, an email from months ago, long before I'd noticed any changes in Mike's behavior. Can't wait for our business trip next week, it read. I've booked the hotel, same room as last time. My world tilted on its axis. This wasn't a recent thing. This had been going on for months, right under my nose. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen through tears. It was the ping of a new email arriving that snapped me out of my daze. Without thinking, I clicked on it. It was from Mike's assistant, the other woman. My heart raced as I read the words, "Missing you already, when can we meet again?" In that moment, something inside me snapped. I'd been hurt, betrayed, lied to, but now I was angry. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed Mike's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious. "Sarah? I know everything," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "I know about the business trips, the hotel rooms. I know it's been going on for months." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "How did you—" "It doesn't matter," I cut him off. "What matters is that you've been lying to me for months, years maybe. How could you do this, Mike?" "Sarah, I'm so sorry," he began, but I couldn't bear to hear his excuses. "Save it," I snapped. "I don't want to hear it. I need time to think. Don't call me. Don't come to the house. I'll contact you when I'm ready." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking as I set down the phone. For a long moment, I sat there in the silence of my home, letting the reality of the situation wash over me. My marriage was over. The life I thought I had, the future I'd planned, it was all gone. But as I sat there, something unexpected happened. Amid the pain and anger, I felt a flicker of something else. Determination. Strength. I'd been knocked down, yes, but I wasn't out, not by a long shot. I picked up my phone again, this time dialing Lisa's number. "Hey," I said when she answered, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I need a favor. Can you help me find a good divorce lawyer?" As I hung up, I took a deep breath, feeling like I could finally see clearly for the first time in months. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. And I was ready to face it head on. The road ahead would be tough, I knew that. But I also knew something else. I was tougher. And I was going to prove it. To Mike, to the world, but most importantly, to myself. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I threw myself into gathering evidence, determined to build a rock-solid case for the divorce. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It was a Tuesday morning when I decided to follow Mike. I know, it sounds crazy, like something out of a bad movie. But I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed proof that couldn't be explained away or denied. I called in sick to work and parked my car down the street from his apartment. As I sat there watching the front door, I felt ridiculous. What was I doing? Was this really who I'd become? But then I saw him. Mike, walking out the door, looking sharp in his suit. My heart clenched at the sight of him. A mix of love and anger that I was starting to think would never fully go away. I followed him at a distance, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. He drove to his office building, and for a moment, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was just a normal workday. But then I saw her, the assistant. She was waiting by the front door, and when Mike approached, she greeted him with a kiss that was definitely not professional. I felt sick, even though I had the emails and the texts. Seeing it in person was a whole different level of pain. I was so focused on them that I didn't notice the car in front of me stopping. I slammed on my brakes, but it was too late. The crunch of metal on metal filled the air, and my car lurched forward. Great, just great. As I exchanged information with the other driver, I kept glancing toward the office building. Mike and his assistant were long gone, probably laughing and flirting in the elevator while I dealt with this mess. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, frustrated, and sporting a nasty bruise from where the seatbelt had caught me. I collapsed on the couch, feeling utterly defeated. That's when my phone rang. It was Lisa. "Hey, how'd it go?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, saw my husband kissing his mistress, got into a fender bender, probably totaled my car. Just a typical Tuesday." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, "Oh honey, I'm coming over and I'm bringing wine." An hour later, Lisa and I were sprawled on my living room floor, surrounded by empty takeout containers and half-full wine glasses. "You know what the worst part is," I said, my words slightly slurred. "I still love him. How messed up is that? After everything he's done, I still love him." Lisa reached over and squeezed my hand. "It's not messed up, it's human. You can't just turn off your feelings like a switch." I nodded, feeling tears well up in my eyes. I want to hate him. It would be so much easier if I could just hate him." "Give it time," Lisa said softly. "The anger will come, and when it does, we'll be ready." We spent the rest of the evening planning, not just for the divorce, but for my future. Lisa helped me update my resume, brainstormed ideas for new hobbies I could try. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, nursing a slight hangover, I decided to try again. This time, I was smarter about it. I borrowed Lisa's car and parked further away from Mike's office. I watched as Mike and his assistant left for lunch, following them at a safe distance. They went to a little cafe, the kind of place Mike and I used to love. I felt a pang in my chest as I watched them laugh and talk, his hand resting on hers on the table. I was so focused on them that I didn't notice the waiter approaching my table until he was right next to me. "Can I get you anything, miss?" he asked, startling me so badly I knocked over my water glass. As I scrambled to mop up the spill, I glanced back at Mike's table. He was looking right at me, his face a mix of shock and guilt. Busted. I fled the cafe, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. I half expected Mike to follow me, to try to explain or apologize, but he didn't, and somehow that hurt more than if he had. I spent the rest of the day holed up in my house, ignoring calls from both Mike and Lisa. I felt like a failure. What kind of person stalks their own husband? What had I become? As night fell, I found myself sitting on the floor of my bedroom, surrounded by photo albums, pictures of our wedding, our honeymoon, countless happy moments over the years. Had it all been a lie? I was so lost in my thoughts that I almost missed the sound of a key in the lock. My heart raced as I heard footsteps approaching the bedroom. "Sarah?" Mike's voice called out softly. I froze, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to run and hide, but a larger part was tired of running, tired of hiding. "In here," I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. Mike appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of concern and guilt. "Are you okay? I saw you at the cafe and I was worried." I let out a bitter laugh. "Worried? That's rich, coming from you." He flinched at my words but didn't back down. I know I have no right to be here, no right to ask how you're doing, but I still care about you, Sarah. Care about me? I spat, anger suddenly coursing through me. If you cared about me, you wouldn't have cheated. You wouldn't have lied. You wouldn't have thrown away 10 years of marriage for what? A fling with your assistant. Mike's face crumpled. It wasn't just a fling. I think I love her. His words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, feeling like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Get out, I whispered, my voice shaking. Get out of my house. Now. He hesitated for a moment, looking like he wanted to say more, but something in my face must have warned him off. Without another word, he turned and left. As the front door clicked shut behind him, I sank to the floor, sobs racking my body. This was it, the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. But as I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of our life together, I felt something shift inside me. The sadness was still there, yes, but alongside it, growing stronger by the minute, was something else. Anger, pure, white-hot anger. And with that anger came a realization. I was done being the victim, done following Mike around, hoping for what? A reconciliation, an explanation, no more. It was time to take control of my life, time to stop focusing on what I'd lost and start thinking about what I could gain. As I stood up, wiping away my tears, I made a promise to myself. This was the last time I'd cry over Mike, the last time I'd let him make me feel small. From now on, I was going to focus on me, on building a new life, a better life. And if Mike thought he could just waltz back in here and play on my emotions, well, he had another thing coming. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound determination. No more stalking, no more crying. It was time to take action. I called my boss and took a personal day, then dialed the number of the divorce lawyer Lisa had recommended. Sarah Thompson, I said when the receptionist answered. I need to schedule an appointment as soon as possible. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a plush office, facing a stern-looking woman in her 50s, Janet Reeves, according to the nameplate on her desk. So, Mrs. Thompson, she said, peering at me over her glasses, tell me why you're here. I took a deep breath and launched into my story. The suspicions, the investigation, the confrontation. Janet listened without interrupting, jotting down notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. Well, Mrs. Thompson, it seems you have a strong case for infidelity. Have you considered what you want out of this divorce? I blinked, caught off guard. I hadn't really thought about it. I just want it to be over. Janet shook her head. That's not good enough. We need to be strategic here. Your husband has betrayed you, yes. But now we need to ensure you come out of this divorce in the best possible position. We spent the next hour discussing assets, alimony, and division of property. By the time I left Janet's office, my head was spinning, but I felt more in control than I had in weeks. On my way home, I decided to stop by my office to pick up some files. As I walked through the parking lot, I spotted a familiar car, Mike's car. My heart raced as I approached the building. What was he doing here? As I stepped into the elevator, I heard his voice drifting down the hallway. He was talking to someone, his tone hushed but urgent. I'm telling you, it's not a good time, he was saying. Sarah's on the warpath. We need to lay low for a while. I felt my blood boil. On the warpath. How dare he? Without thinking, I stormed around the corner. Mike was standing there, phone to his ear, his back to me. I cleared my throat loudly. He spun around, his face paling when he saw me. I'll call you back, he muttered into the phone before hanging up. Sarah, he said, his voice strained. I didn't expect to see you here. Clearly, I said, my voice ice cold. What are you doing at my office, Mike? He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I used to find endearing. Now it just irritated me. I came to talk to your boss about the divorce. I thought maybe we could keep things civil, you know, for the sake of both our careers. I let out a bitter laugh. Civil? You want to talk about civil? Was it civil when you were sneaking around behind my back? When you were lying to my face for months? Mike flinched at my words. Sarah, please, can we not do this here? I took a step closer to him, anger coursing through my veins. No, Mike. We're doing this here and now. You don't get to decide when and where we talk about this. You lost that right when you decided to cheat. He looked around nervously, clearly aware of the curious glances from my coworkers. I know I messed up, okay? I know I hurt you. But dragging this out, making it messy, it's not going to help anyone. Help anyone, I repeated, my voice rising. You mean it's not going to help you? You're worried about your precious reputation, aren't you? Worried about what people will think when they find out what you did. Mike's face hardened. You're not exactly innocent in all this, Sarah. Following me around, snooping through my emails. You're not the victim you're making yourself out to be. His words hit me like a slap in the face. For a moment, I was speechless. Then, something inside me snapped. You know what, Mike? You're right. I'm not a victim. Not anymore. I'm a woman who was betrayed by the man she loved, who had her entire life turned upside down. And now I'm a woman who's going to make damn sure you face the consequences of your actions. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking with rage. I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving Mike standing there, open-mouthed. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. How'd it go with the lawyer? I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, yes, but also a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was in control. It went well, I texted back. And you won't believe who I just ran into at the office. As I drove home, I couldn't help but smile. Mike thought I was on the warpath. He hadn't seen anything yet. This was just the beginning. Because the truth was, I was done being the understanding wife. Done being the woman who stood by her man no matter what. It was time for a new Sarah. A stronger Sarah. A Sarah who wasn't afraid to fight for what she deserved. And if Mike thought he could smooth talk his way out of this, he had another thing coming. Because this time, I wasn't backing down. This time, I was going to win. As the days turned into weeks, I threw myself into building my case. I spent hours poring over financial records, documenting every suspicious transaction, every unexplained expense. My dining room table became a war room, covered in papers and sticky notes. Lisa was my rock through it all. She'd come over after work, armed with takeout and a sympathetic ear. We'd sit there picking through bank statements and email printouts, trying to piece together the full extent of Mike's betrayal. Look at this, I said one evening, pushing a credit card statement towards her. A charge for a jewelry store last month. Our anniversary was nowhere near then. Lisa's eyes widened. You think he bought something for her? I nodded, feeling a fresh wave of hurt wash over me. Probably, and with our joint account, no less. As we dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Weekend business trips that coincided with charges at high-end hotels. Expensive dinners for two at restaurants Mike and I had never visited together. It was like watching our marriage unravel in real time, documented in cold, hard numbers. One night, as I was going through Mike's old phone records, I noticed something odd. A series of calls to a number I didn't recognize. Always late at night or early in the morning. Hey Lisa, I called out. Can you look up this number for me? She tapped away on her phone for a moment, then let out a low whistle. Sarah, it's a divorce lawyer. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What? When are these calls from? Lisa scrolled through the records. Looks like they started about 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Long before I'd noticed any changes, before I'd had any suspicions. Mike had been planning this, planning to leave me. I don't remember much of what happened next. I vaguely recall Lisa's concerned voice, feel of her arms around me as I broke down. But mostly, I remember the anger, the raw, all-consuming rage that burned through me. leaving me feeling hollow and cold. When I finally calmed down, I made a decision. No more playing nice, no more hoping for an amicable split. If Mike wanted a fight, I'd give him one. The next morning, I marched into Janet's office, my arms full of documents. I want everything, I told her, my voice steady. The house, the car, half of his pension, everything. Janet raised an eyebrow. That's quite a change from our last meeting. What happened? I spread the documents on her desk. I found out he's been planning this for months. He's been talking to a divorce lawyer since before I even knew anything was wrong. Janet's expression hardened as she looked through the evidence. Well, Mrs. Thompson, it seems your husband has made a grave miscalculation. This changes everything. Over the next few hours, we formulated a plan. We'd use Mike's secret consultations with a divorce lawyer as leverage, arguing that he'd been planning to leave the marriage long before the affair came to light. It wasn't a guarantee, Janet warned me, but it gave us a strong position to negotiate from. As I left her office, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was scared of what lay ahead, but a larger part felt excited, energized. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my life. That feeling lasted until I got home and found Mike waiting on the front porch. "We need to talk," he said as I approached. I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. "Oh, I have nothing to say to you," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Sarah, please, this doesn't have to be ugly. We can work this out between us, without lawyers and courts." I let out a bitter laugh. "Without lawyers? That's rich coming from you. How long have you been talking to divorce attorneys, Mike? 6 months? 7? The color drained from his face. "How did you—" "No," I cut him off. "I know everything, Mike. The hotels, the jewelry, the secret phone calls. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" He took a step towards me, his hands outstretched. "Sarah, I can explain." "Save it," I snapped, backing away. "I'm not interested in your explanations or your excuses. You want to talk. Talk to my lawyer." As I brushed past him to enter the house, he grabbed my arm. "Sarah, wait, please. I never meant for any of this to happen. I still care about you." For a moment, I faltered. The pain in his eyes, the familiar warmth of his hand on my arm, it brought back a rush of memories, happy times, laughter, love. For a split second, I wanted nothing more than to fall into his arms, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the months of planning behind my back. I yanked my arm away. "Don't touch me," I hissed. "You lost the right to care about me when you decided to throw away our marriage." "That's not fair," Mike protested. "It wasn't just me. Our marriage was falling apart long before the affair." His words hit me like a slap in the face. "So it's my fault, is that what you're saying?" Mike backpedaled quickly. "No, that's not. I just mean, we were both unhappy. The affair was a symptom, not the cause." I stared at him, hardly able to believe what I was hearing. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Get off my property before I call the police." He opened his mouth as if to argue, then thought better of it. With a final, pleading look, he turned and walked away. As soon as he was gone, I collapsed against the front door, my legs shaking. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I was done crying over Mike. I pulled out my phone and dialed Lisa's number. "Can you come over?" I asked when she answered. "I need your help with something." An hour later, Lisa and I were in the backyard, a small fire burning in the fire pit. One by one, I tossed in the mementos of my life with Mike. Photos, love letters, the dried flowers from our first date that I'd kept all these years. As I watched them burn, I felt something shift inside me. The last lingering threads of hope, of love for the man I thought Mike was, went up in smoke along with the physical reminders of our life together. "Oh, you okay?" Lisa asked, squeezing my hand. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Yeah," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "I really am." As the fire died down, I made a promise to myself. No more looking back. No more what ifs or could have beens. From now on, I was looking forward to a life without Mike, without lies, without betrayal, a life that was entirely my own. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of calm. Today was the day I'd confront Mike with everything I knew, the day I'd finally take back control of my life. I spent the morning preparing, going over my notes one last time, rehearsing what I wanted to say. Lisa called to check in, offering to come with me for moral support, but I declined. This was something I needed to do on my own. As I drove to the cafe where we'd agreed to meet, my mind wandered back to happier times. Mike and I had our first date here. All those years ago, I remembered how nervous I'd been, how my hands shook as I sipped my coffee. Now, my hands were steady, my resolve unshakable. I spotted Mike as soon as I walked in. He was sitting at a corner table, fidgeting with a sugar packet. When he saw me, he stood up, a hopeful smile on his face. "Sarah," he said, moving to pull out my chair. "I'm so glad you agreed to meet." I sat down, ignoring his attempt at chivalry. "Let's skip the pleasantries. Mike, we both know why we're here." His smile faltered. "Right, of course, I want you to know how sorry I am for everything." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. The man I'd loved for over a decade, the man I thought I'd grow old with. Now he was practically a stranger. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, my voice steady. "Not this time." Mike leaned forward, his eyes pleading. "I know I messed up, Sarah, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work on our marriage." I cut him off with a harsh laugh. "Our marriage? There is no our anymore, Mike. You made sure of that when you decided to sleep with your assistant." He flinched at my words. "It wasn't like that, it just happened." "Things like that don't just happen," I snapped. "You made a choice. Multiple choices, actually. Every time you lied to me, every time you snuck around behind my back, those were all choices." Mike ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "You're right, I did make choices. Terrible choices that I regret more than you can imagine. But Sarah, we have history, 10 years of marriage. That has to count for something." For a moment I faltered. The pain in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice. It would be so easy to give in, to try to salvage what we once had. But then I remembered the secret phone calls, the hidden bank accounts, the months of planning his exit strategy. I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of papers, laying them on the table between us. "You're right, Mike. We do have history, including your history of planning to leave me for months before I even knew anything was wrong." His face paled as he looked at the documents, bank statements, phone records, email printouts, all the evidence of his betrayal, laid out in black and white. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I cut him off. What matters is that I know everything. The hotels, the jewelry, the consultations with divorce lawyers, all of it." Mike slumped in his chair, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "Sarah, I can explain." "I don't want your explanations," I said, my voice hard. "I want a divorce, and I want everything." His head snapped up at that. "Everything? What do you mean?" I leaned forward, meeting his gaze steadily. "I mean the house, the car, half of your pension, everything you've been trying to hide from me." Mike's face hardened. "You can't be serious. That's not fair." "Fair?" I repeated, incredulous. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you were sneaking around behind my back? When you were planning to leave me while pretending everything was fine?" He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm not done. You see, Mike, I've learned a lot over the past few weeks. About you, about our marriage, but most importantly, about myself. And do you know what I've realized?" Mike shook his head, looking wary. "I've realized that I'm stronger than I ever knew, that I deserve better than what you've put me through, and that I'm not going to let you walk away from this marriage with everything while I'm left with nothing. I stood up, gathering my papers. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. I suggest you prepare yourself because I'm not backing down. Not this time. As I turned to leave, Mike called out, his voice desperate. Sarah, wait, please, can't we talk about this? I paused, looking back at him. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with, the man who'd promised to love and cherish me forever. But that man was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. We're done talking. I said softly. We're done with a lot of things. With that, I walked out of the cafe, leaving Mike and our shattered marriage behind. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. I pulled out my phone and dialed Lisa's number. It's done, I said when she answered. I did it. I'm so proud of you, Lisa replied, her voice warm. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. Honestly, I feel set free, like I can finally start moving forward. As I drove home, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. The start of a new chapter in my life. One where I was in control. One where I didn't have to depend on anyone else for my happiness. It wouldn't be easy, I knew that. There would be tough days ahead. Legal battles to fight. A life to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came my way. Because I was Sarah Thompson. And I was stronger than any betrayal, any heartbreak. I was a survivor. And this was just the beginning of my comeback story. The days after my confrontation with Mike blurred together in a haze of meetings with lawyers, paperwork, and sleepless nights. I felt like I was on an emotional roller coaster, swinging between fierce determination and crushing despair. One morning, I woke up and couldn't find the energy to get out of bed. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the impending divorce, the uncertain future seemed to press down on me, making it hard to breathe. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done before. Then I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling utterly lost. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Hey, haven't heard from you in a couple days. Everything okay? I stared at the message, tears welling up in my eyes. Was everything okay? I didn't even know anymore. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Lisa. Hey, I answered, my voice rough from disuse. Sarah? What's wrong? Lisa's concern was palpable even through the phone. And just like that, the dam broke. I poured out everything. My fears, my doubts, the overwhelming sadness that had taken hold of me. I don't know if I can do this, Lisa, I sobbed. Maybe I should just give up. Let Mike have whatever he wants. I'm so tired of fighting. Oh, honey, Lisa said softly. I'm coming over, don't move. 30 minutes later, Lisa was at my door, armed with coffee and pastries. She took one look at me, still in my pajamas, hair a mess, eyes puffy from crying, and pulled me into a hug. Okay, she said, steering me towards the couch. We're having an intervention. Over the next few hours, Lisa listened as I poured out all my fears and insecurities. She held my hand as I cried, offered tissues and words of encouragement. Sarah, she said finally, her voice gentle but firm, you've come so far. You can't give up now. I shook my head, feeling hopeless. But what if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't do this on my own? Lisa squeezed my hand. But you're not on your own. You've got me, your family, your friends. We're all here for you. She stood up, pulling me with her. Come on, we're going out. Despite my protests, Lisa dragged me to a nearby park. The sun was shining and the air was crisp with the promise of fall. Okay, Lisa said as we walked. I want you to tell me 3 things you're proud of yourself for doing since this whole mess started. I thought for a moment. I hired a lawyer. I stood up to Mike at the cafe, and I guess I've been pretty good at gathering evidence for the divorce. Lisa nodded encouragingly. Good. Now, Tell me 3 things you're looking forward to in your new life. This was harder. I'd been so focused on the divorce, on the past, that I hadn't really thought about the future. I don't know, I admitted. That's okay, Lisa said. Let's think about it together. What about traveling? You always talked about wanting to see Europe. A small spark of excitement flickered in my chest. Yeah, that would be nice. And maybe I could take those photography classes I've always wanted to try. As we continued walking and talking, I felt something shift inside me. The fog of depression that had settled over me began to lift, replaced by a tentative sense of hope. When we got back to my house, Lisa helped me make a plan. We cleaned the house from top to bottom, getting rid of anything that reminded me too much of Mike. We made a list of goals, both for the divorce and for my life after it. Remember, Lisa said as she was leaving that evening, it's okay to have bad days. It's okay to feel sad or angry or scared. But don't let those feelings consume you. You're stronger than you know, Sarah. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I started seeing a therapist, something I'd always been hesitant about before. I joined a support group for divorced women, where I found comfort in sharing my story and hearing others. I also focused on rediscovering myself. I took up running, finding solace in the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. I signed up for those photography classes, rediscovering a passion I'd let slide during my marriage. There were still tough days, of course. Days when I'd come across an old photo of Mike and me, or hear a song that reminded me of our happier times. On those days, I'd allow myself to feel the pain, to grieve for the life I'd lost. But slowly, surely, I began to heal. I started to see my divorce not as an ending, but as a new beginning. A chance to reinvent myself, to become the person I'd always wanted to be. One evening, as I was sorting through some old papers, I came across my wedding vows. I remembered standing there looking into Mike's eyes, promising to love and cherish him forever. For a moment, the familiar ache of loss washed over me. But then I realized something. Those vows, those promises, they weren't just to Mike. They were to myself too. I had promised to love and cherish myself, to be true to who I was. In staying with Mike, in accepting his betrayal and lies, I had broken that promise to myself. But now, by leaving, by fighting for what I deserved, I was finally keeping it. I picked up my phone and dialed Janet's number. "Mrs. Thompson," she answered. "What can I do for you?" I took a deep breath. "I'm ready," I said. "Whatever we need to do next in the divorce proceedings, I'm ready." I could hear the smile in Janet's voice as she replied, "That's what I like to hear. Let's set up a meeting for tomorrow and go over our next steps." As I hung up, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in months, I felt truly, genuinely okay. Not just surviving, but ready to start thriving. I walked to the mirror, looking at my reflection. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who had discovered her husband's betrayal all those months ago. This woman was stronger, wiser, more resilient. "You've got this," I told my reflection, and for the first time, I truly believed it. That night, as I lay in bed, I didn't dream of the past or worry about the future. Instead, I felt a sense of excitement, of possibility. Tomorrow was a new day, a new chance to keep building the life I deserved. And I was ready for it, all of it. The morning of the final divorce hearing dawned bright and clear. I stood in front of my mirror, straightening my blazer and taking deep breaths. This was it, the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. "You've got this," I whispered to my reflection, echoing the words that had become my mantra over the past few months. As I drove to the courthouse, my mind wandered back over everything that had led to this moment. The pain, the anger, the tears, but also the growth, the self-discovery, the newfound strength. It had been a hell of a journey, but I wouldn't change it for the world. Lisa was waiting for me outside the courthouse, a reassuring smile on her face. "Ready?" she asked, giving my hand a squeeze. I nodded, feeling calm and confident, more than ready. Inside, I spotted Mike and his lawyer huddled in a corner. Mike looked pale and tired, his usually immaculate suit slightly rumpled. For a moment, I felt a pang of something, not regret exactly, but a sort of wistful sadness for what could have been. But then he looked up and saw me. His eyes widened, taking in my appearance, the smart suit, the confident stance, the determined set of my jaw. I saw something flicker in his expression, surprise, regret. It didn't matter anymore. I turned away, focusing on Janet as she approached. "Mrs. Thompson," she said with a nod. "Are you prepared?" "Absolutely," I replied, my voice steady. The hearing itself was surprisingly anticlimactic. After months of preparation and worry, it was over in less than an hour. The judge reviewed our settlement agreement, asked a few questions, and then it was done. With the bang of a gavel, my marriage was officially over. As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Mike standing there, looking uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, looking at Lisa and Janet. They both nodded encouragingly. 5 minutes, I said to Mike, leading him to a quiet corner. For a moment, we just stood there, the silence stretching between us. Then Mike spoke. "You look good, Sarah," he said softly. "Really good," I nodded, unsure how to respond. "Thanks, I feel good." Mike ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart twinge. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I regret how things ended between us. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. The man I'd loved, the man who'd broken my heart. But now I felt nothing but a calm acceptance. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I hope you find happiness, Mike. I really do." He blinked, clearly surprised by my response. "You too, Sarah. You deserve it." As I walked away, I felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. It was really over. I was free. Outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. Lisa linked her arm through mine, grinning. "So, Ms. Newly single," she said. "What now?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Now we celebrate. We spent the evening at our favorite restaurant, surrounded by friends who had supported me through this whole ordeal. As I looked around the table, listening to the laughter and chatter, I felt a rush of gratitude. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass. Everyone fell silent, turning to look at me. To new beginnings, to second chances, and to the family we choose for ourselves. Thank you all for being here, for supporting me through the darkest time of my life. I couldn't have done it without you. There were cheers and clinking glasses, and more than a few teary eyes. As the night wore on, I found myself reflecting on the journey I'd been through. I thought about the woman I was at the start of all this, broken, betrayed, unsure of herself, and I compared her to the woman I was now, strong, confident, ready to take on the world. It hadn't been an easy road. There had been days when I wanted to give up, when the pain seemed too much to bear. But I'd pushed through. I'd fought for myself, for my future, in a way I never had before. As the celebration wound down and I prepared to head home, Lisa pulled me aside. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her eyes shining. "You know that, right?" I hugged her tightly, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," I whispered. "Yes, you could have," Lisa said firmly, pulling back to look me in the eye. "You're stronger than you know, Sarah. You always have been." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about what the future might hold. For the first time in a long time, the possibilities seemed endless. Maybe I'd take that trip to Europe I'd always dreamed of. Maybe I'd go back to school or change careers. Maybe I'd fall in love again someday with someone who truly deserved me. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready for it. I had survived the worst and come out stronger. I had rediscovered myself, rebuilt my life from the ground up. As I drifted off to sleep, a smile on my face, I made a promise to myself to always remember this feeling, this strength, to never again let anyone make me feel small or unworthy, to keep fighting for the life I deserved, because I was Sarah Thompson, survivor, fighter, and this was just the beginning of my story. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling refreshed and energized. I had the whole day ahead of me, the first day of my new life. As I sipped my coffee, I opened my laptop and began to type. Chapter 1, I wrote. The day I discovered my own strength. Who knew? Maybe someday, my story would help another woman find her way out of the darkness. Maybe my journey could be a beacon of hope for someone else. But for now, I had a life to live, a future to build, and I couldn't wait to get started.